was just thinking of a story I like to share with you. There was a young man that lived in a village in India who had a real problem with anger. And he was constantly getting angry at everybody about everything and overreacting a lot of the time. And so finally, as he grew up, he decided he would try to do something about it. And in India, I guess the equivalent of seeing a therapist in our country would be to go to the Himalayas and meditate, which he did, went to a cave, and he ended up staying there for about 20 years. Like a classical psychoanalysis. Anyway, he stayed for about 20 years, and he finally came back home to his village to visit. And when he got back, people were really happy to see him, and they greeted him and ran up to him and saying how great it was to see him. And then they said, "We would like to just learn from you because you've been away meditating for 20 years. There must be so much you learned from that because we've been real busy here with other things of life. So tell us what you learned." He thought for a minute and he says, "Well, I learned how to control my anger." They said, "That's wonderful. We remember you had a problem with anger. And I'm so glad that happened. What else did you learn that you could share with us?" And he paused silently for a bit, and finally they said, "Well, certainly, you must be something else that you've learned because you were up there for 20 years. We've been here taking care of our businesses and our families and our children and all this, and there must be something else you learned." And he says, "Well, I learned how to control my anger." And they said, "Well, we really are so honored that you came back to share it with us because you've been away for so long and meditating for all these years. There must be something else that you've learned." He says, "You dumb nincompoops, I told you 3 times already I learned how to control my anger." He stormed off back to the caves. And what he illustrates for us is how easy it probably is for us to control our anger or to be at peace if there are no other human beings around. But once you've got another human being there that has different feelings, different attitudes, different values, different habits, different mannerisms, does things different from the way we do it, well, you know what the world has always done with that, don't you? If somebody doesn't believe what I do, it's time to go kill them. That's the cause of most of our wars, isn't it? If we don't think they would agree or do things the way we think they should do it, then we need to get rid of them. And that's been part of the human condition. And we've lived with that since probably the beginning of mankind, whenever that was, when we evolved. The question is, what do we do then? How do we deal with that kind of thing in our lives? Well, one thing we know is that we are really, strangely enough, inheritors of a part of our brain that must be millions of years old from the time we were reptiles, sometimes referred to as a reptilian brain. Neuroscientists call it the limbic system, the survival brain. And in that brain, there's just encodings of information that are there. And that encoding of information is somewhat based on our past experiences. For example, if you had an experience of walking down the street, let's say you were down in the Okefenokee Swamp in Georgia, and you got bitten by a rattlesnake, what's going to happen when you start walking at dusk through the woods and you see something that looks like a snake? You're going to run and grab a club, aren't you? Or you're going to run away or try to have a weapon or escape in some way. You're going to fight or flight mode. Well, we all do that because we've all had painful experiences in our lives growing up. None of us had the perfect childhood. None of us had perfect love. None of us had the perfect kind of support or discipline or encouragement or rewards or whatever it might be, or affection. None of us had that. So I think in my field, for example, it would be very important if we get rid of all these dumb diagnostic categories that we're supposed to put labels on people for insurance companies. Stop calling things pathology, but begin to realize we're part of a human condition. And a human condition where we have some programming, almost like wrong programming, erroneous programming in a computer. And what do you do when you have a program in your computer you don't like? Do you put a diagnostic label on it and call it bad or sick? No, you just delete that old program and install a new one, don't you? We need to begin to think about ourselves that way too, rather than making people sick or crazy or wrong. To see there's some faulty downloading here that's occurred, and that there are ways we have now to delete that information. Because one problem we face is that we have grown up all thinking we probably are quite conscious human beings, don't we? Don't most of us go around thinking we're pretty conscious? Do you know what the truth is? 95 to 97% of our behaviors are all unconscious. That shocks us, doesn't it? Makes us feel kind of weird to think that that much of our behavior is not conscious to us. Now that's the good news and the bad news. The good news is that's the way you learn to walk, that's the way you learn to talk, that's the way you learned a lot of skills, that's the way you learned a lot of positive things about surviving in the world, the way you learn to put on your clothes, the way you learn to do your math and go to school and all that sort of stuff. And that's the way you learn to drive a car. And you'd want to be riding in a car with somebody who's unconscious. You'll be safer, actually. If you're in the car with a new driver and another car pulls out in front of you, you don't want to be with a brand new driver. That person won't know how to divert that accident. You're going to have a crash. But if somebody's been driving for 15 years, automatically, without any thought at all, they will divert that, from that crash. And they won't have the accident. So there's a lot that's positive about our unconscious. But we also have the part that's unconscious that causes us pain and suffering. That causes us difficulty in our relationships. Causes us to get sick. Causes us to not fulfill our dreams. Causes us to feel inadequate, insecure, carrying beliefs like we'll be abandoned, or I won't be liked, or I'm not good enough, or I have to be perfect to be loved. All of those kind of things occur, and they get encoded and become software in our brains. So what do we do about all this? That's what we want to focus on tonight a little bit more, because I believe in practical tools. And I think that who could try to build a house without tools? Who could repair an automobile without tools? Who of us can deal with our psychological and spiritual lives without tools? We have enough books telling us what we should do, but we need to have some tools to carry it out. But we also, more than that, need to see why we don't even carry out what we think we should, or what we know would be helpful.